Hey everyone, this is for the Stat 330 students. This is something that I wanted to put together because this is a question that I've been getting a lot, and it's something that has caused a lot of confusion in the past, so I thought I'd give you a little bit of review on these topics that we talked about recently. It's on the LIBNAME statement, permanent data sets, and how we use the set statement with that. And hopefully with this little example that I'm going to give you, that it'll make things a little bit clearer. Okay. So, I want to start off with something very basic, and let's just start with first principles and build our way up there. So, let's suppose we have this very simple code where I'm bringing in two variables, ID and age, and let's keep this data set really small. And just make sure you understand what's going on there. This is just a little bit of review. So what this is saying is that we're going to make a data set matrix called list. So somewhere off to the side, you can think about in SAS's memory, it's thinking about it's going to create a data set matrix. It's called list. It'll have two variables, ID and age. And it's only going to have these particular three observations. 1, 12, 2, 26, 3. And 42, and we're finished. So that's the data set matrix. It's called list, and what this actually does is this will create, as we talked about in class, a file. And if you looked at that file on the computer, have that icon, and it's called list.sas7bdat. Okay. Now, in terms of where it'll be located, if you recall, back over here, when we put data list, just saying list by itself, that's exactly equivalent to putting this down, work.list. When we don't specify the two-level name, just only specify the name of the dataset matrix itself, then that's implying that we're going to be saving this dataset matrix temporarily in what we call the work directory. Right? So you could think of somewhere on the computer, there's the equivalent of some kind of folder like that. And what this is going to do is it's going to put that file there. Okay. So that's just a review of what that's saying. But the only problem with that is if we were to shut down our SAS program and shut down the computer, that work directory will be completely empty and that'll be lost. So that's why this is a temporary data set. And it'd be nice if we'd be able to not have this put into a folder that's going to be emptied every time SAS is closed, but to put it somewhere more permanent. So let's suppose you have this particular location on your flash drive, and you instead want to do all of this except save this into here. That's basically where we want to go. All right? So in order to do this, this is why we need this thing called a LIBNAME statement. So I'm going to put this aside, but we'll bring this back in a minute here. Right. So again, as a reminder, here's the idea. We have our end goal in mind. We have this file. List.sas7bdat that we eventually want to create, and we want to store this into some location, and let's say it's that folder on your flash drive. Okay. Now, in order to do this, what we need to first set up is a LIBNAME statement. So LIBNAME. When you specify LIBNAME, it's got two components after that. The last component I'll start with first is the physical location that you're interested in specifying. So I'll put that here. That's the second component of the LIBNAME statement. The first component will be some kind of code word, some kind of keyword that you want to use to associate that particular folder with. And you call this whatever you want. I'll call it green. Alright. So back in my picture here, there's this code word, green, that's associated with that folder. And what that tells SAS is anytime it sees a file name reference, and it has the word green in it, it'll automatically know you're talking about the stat folder on the E drive. This is all that the LIBNAME statement does. It establishes a link between a physical location and some keyword, code word that you create. Okay. Now, the rest of this is very simple. Data. If I just put list here, as I did before, we won't change anything, because then what that's going to do is cause this to be stored into the work directory. So that is, again, you're only specifying one level of the data set reference. So we need to specify both levels. And the first word will be this. We'll put data green.list, and what that's saying is that we're going to create a new dataset matrix. It's called list. And that will be stored. So think about that. That particular name, it will be stored or be referenced to this particular location. That location being here. Okay. Everything else actually will now be the same. Everything else will have the exact same components. So if you recall, we had input, ID, age, and we had data lines. And I think that data looks something like this, 26, 3, 42. All right. And that'll do exactly what we wanted to do down here, which is to create a new dataset matrix list. It's going to have these two columns, these two variables, those three observations, and I want to store this permanently in this particular location, on my flash drive, for example, and the folder is called stat. Okay. If I were to shut down SAS at that point, after I've compiled it, after I shut down the computer even, that file will be on there permanently. So that's nice, because if I ever want to refer to it in the future, I don't have to go through all of this to read in the dataset matrix. So this is all about storing permanent data sets. Alright. So hopefully that makes sense on what we're trying to accomplish with this LIBNAME statement. Okay. Keep this in mind, and then we'll go on to my last example here. So my last example is, let's suppose, for example, that we shut down the computer, shut down SAS, but you did just go through all of that process in creating that specific permanent data set file. All right, so I want to remind you about that down here. So again, we have this folder. EStat. And there's a dataset matrix in there that we just stored. And it was called list.sas7bdat. Okay. It's in there. Now, let's suppose you wanted to do the following. Okay. You want to create a new dataset matrix that's based on the exact contents of this list dataset, but you want to do also a manipulation and create a new variable, but you want to store that in a new dataset matrix. So the name of that dataset matrix, let's suppose, is called, I'll call it sheet. SHE.SAS7bdat. Okay. And I want this particular dataset matrix to be originally based on that, so there's going to be a linkage there. But I'd like to store this in a totally different location. Let's suppose there's a K drive on the server and you want to put it in a particular folder on there called class. So here's the K drive. There's the class folder. And we want to store it in there. Okay. So keep that in mind. That's going to be the setup. And let's think about what kind of code that you'll need to use in order to make that happen. So let's start from the very beginning. Again, let's pretend that you had shut down SAS. So if you shut down SAS, it doesn't remember any LIBNAME statements that you have set up previously, unless you put that in an auto-exec file or something. But again, let's just pretend it's all new. You just started off the computer. We'll need to specify a LIBNAME statement, once again, for this particular folder. Okay. And we'll need to, again, specify a keyword and that physical location. That physical location is estat. And again, you could use whatever word you want to use there. I'll use the same word I used before, and it's green. So I know that from SAS's perspective, anytime it sees the word green in reference to a dataset matrix, it'll know we're talking about that stat folder on the E drive. And with this particular folder, I'll need to establish another type of link. That particular location is on the K drive. The folder is called class, and you could again call this whatever you want, as long as it's not the same name as that, or else it'll be confusing. And so I'll just call this blue. All right. And we'll see how that's going to come into play. So remember, and all that does is that sets up a link for SAS, so that when it sees the word blue in reference to a dataset matrix name, then it'll know we're talking about the class folder on the K drive. So what I want to do is I want to create this new data set called sheet, and it'll be based on the original list, and we'll do something simple like this. If the age is less than 18, then we'll assign a level variable, and we'll call it group 1. And if it's not that condition, if that condition hasn't been satisfied, then we'll say the level is assigned to group 2. Okay, so it's very simple. Now let's do this. Once again, I want to create a new data matrix, new data set, and the name will be sheet. So that's the second part of the name. If I leave it just like that, just sheet, then of course that's going to be making a temporary data set called sheet into the work directory. That's not what we want. We want to put this into here, which is blue. That's why we have that. In order to bring this in and reference this particular data set that already exists in the E drive stat folder, and the name of that is called list, this is where we use this set statement. And the set statement is going to bring in a mirror image copy of an existing data set matrix, like that. Again, if I just put list there, just put list like that, then it would think that you're trying to bring in a dataset matrix called list that's in the work directory, which isn't the case in our situation here. This is in this particular folder, which is assigned to the keyword green. So you'd need that. Data blue.list set green dot, let me read that right. Data blue.sheet set green.list, and hopefully that makes sense. This will again create a new dataset matrix called sheet into this particular folder, referencing a dataset called list that exists in this folder. Now, I said this in class, but I'll say it again. At this point, it's important for you to remember you do not need an input statement now. Right? This particular file that we created, we already went through the trouble of using an input statement to input an ID and age. That's already there, and it's ready to go. So, we don't need an input statement. We could just refer to those variables right away. And as I mentioned, I had some conditions on age. If age is less than 18, then I'll make a new variable called level, and I'll put that into group 1. Those individuals into group 1. Otherwise, I could have used an else statement here, but let's just write it this way. If age is greater than or equal to 18, then level is equal to group 2. Alright, and it's as simple as that. Let's suppose I'll do that. And keep in mind what this is doing. This is creating a new dataset matrix sheet. So in the memory bank somewhere, it's making this dataset matrix. It has the name sheet, and it's going to have 3 variables in it. The original, ID and age, that we brought in from this particular dataset file that exists, those come into play already. So remember, that's going to be 1, let's see, 12. 12, 226, 342. And now we're creating this new variable called level. And it'll be assigned group 1 for any individuals who are less than 18 years of age, so this will be group 1. And everybody else will be group 2. Alright. This dataset matrix has now been created, and it's called sheet, and it'll be stored in this particular folder because we use that 2-level specification there. Okay. So again, hopefully that makes it a little bit clearer on what we're talking about when we're referencing the LIBNAME statement, why you need this. And as a summary, you need those things when you're trying to use a folder that is not the temporary work folder. And you could, and in this example, you could see that we're doing two things. We're creating a folder link, this one, where we're putting stuff into there, a new dataset matrix, and that's where you'll need a LIBNAME statement. You'll also need a LIBNAME statement if you're trying to refer to an existing dataset file that is not in the work directory, and that's why we needed that as well. So that's why you need 2 LIBNAME statements there, and there's no limit. You could have as many LIBNAME statements as you want. Keep in mind that as soon as you specify that, and in your same SAS session, you don't have to say that ever again. If you've already defined LIBNAMEs, you don't have to ever define them. And so one thing that's really convenient is if there's a LIBNAME statement that you are going to be using a lot, for example, on your particular E drive or your flash drive on your computer, and this will be the same folder that you'll always be referencing for existing datasets. You could put that LIBNAME statement into an autoexec file that we talked about in class, and that would be a nice way to do that instead of having to type that over and over. Okay, so again, I hope that was a little bit helpful in clearing some confusions up. If you have any questions or any kind of concerns, just let me know. Come by and talk to me during office hours or send me an email. Thanks.